President, how do you see the future institutions for international partnership? What kind of foundation for parity can Russia propose at the international level? What kind of faces, instruments, and mechanisms we need to find new partners, allies, and friends? Not just words, but in responsible way. Do you think that there is a need for a change, for us to build new approaches in international partnership of the future? Well, you had a very wide question. Even if we call it a question, I think it's more of a position. What I wanted to say that I've basically answered that, what you've just asked. We should and we can highlight the cooperation primarily with the countries who are sovereign in making their fundamental decisions. That's number one. Number two, we need to attain consensus when making decisions. And number three, to achieve balance of interest. What kind of institutions could serve that purpose? Universal international institutions, and number one here is the United Nations. Alan Freeman, please.
Mr. President, I come from Canada, a NATO country, whose future Prime Minister's grandfather was a Banderista. We've heard the worldwide opposition to the stance of NATO and the many voices that exist in the global south. Those voices also exist in the north. They also exist in the collective west. Why don't we hear them? Because they are suppressed. Just look at what happened to Julian Assange. The media, the political elites, the academic elites have mounted an unprecedented campaign which is racist and Russophobic, which intimidates people to prevent them expressing the full extent of their disagreement with what their governments are doing. And so you do not see here the full extent of the opposition that exists in Europe, in Canada, in the United Kingdom. You don't see it. What can we do to build relations between those in the collective West that are fighting what their governments are trying to do, and the support that exists in the global South and in Russia for Russia's courageous actions and position in world politics?
Мне кажется, что никто не...
Well, I think no one should sacrifice anything. As far as their national interests go, you have to fight for your national interests. And we will work in harmony with you, in sync, as it were. Certainly, we do not know in detail how the political fight is unfolding in the collective West. Something you've just said. You know far better than I do what's happening over there. You know that as far as our opposition goes, special services are working with it. You know how the West is acting. Hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, are spent via different channels to support opposition in our country. They're coming up with different ways of sending these resources over, and we find it hard to keep track and keep up. But we're not doing anything like that. But be that as it may, as I said in my speech, our very position on the fundamental issues of development, of international relations in particular, of development of society, we believe this position is attractive to a large number of people, not just in the West, but across the world. We know there are many supporters, many proponents over in the Western countries. And based on these proponents and supporters, we will build further our relations with the collective West. And to you, I would like to wish you every success in your fight for your national interests. I think this will be sufficient for us to be able to build good relations with Russia. Well, let's give me the last word. I would like to ask to raise your hand. Well, anyone who is there, raise your hand and I'll answer your question. Gabashtiat, please. Good evening, Mr. President. At the beginning of our conversation, you said a lot about the special military operation. You spoke about the goals, your assessment of the situation. My question is as follows. On February the 24th, did you think that after 8 months the operation would still be there? Not just still continuing, but even getting worse. Now, many people in the world are scared that a third world war could erupt. And you know, one of my favorite cities on the post-Soviet territory is Odessa. Give me a piece of advice. If I want to go there, say next summer, or maybe in 2 years, well, do not tarry. Go there as soon as possible. Oh, that's a joke. Okay. In 2 years, maybe. And what visa should I apply for? Ukrainian or Russian? If I want to go there. You know, Odessa is truly one of the world's most beautiful cities. As is known, Odessa was founded by Catherine II. And even most extreme nationalists are reluctant, you know, to bring down the monument to the founder of the city. Odessa can be an apple of discord, or it can be a symbol of conflict resolution. It can serve as a symbol of a solution that can be found to everything that is currently unfolding, but it's not up to us. On many occasions we said that we are open to negotiations. And when I spoke at the Kremlin just some time ago, I said that publicly once again. But the current leaders of the Kiev regime have decided not to pursue talks with Russia. There are many, but you know, there are those who have this final say in Washington, and it's very easy for them, you know, to solve this issue. They need to give the proper signal to Kiev for them to change their position to seek a peaceful solution. And that'll do it. As for your possible voyage to Odessa, jokes aside, I recommend you should go there. It's a good, beautiful city with beautiful traditions and history. It's worth seeing and admiring. Well, when I last was in Odessa, it didn't give me the best impression. You know, the utility sector back then was in disarray. You could see it, judging by the facades of the buildings. It was better at the center, but should you take a step outside the center, it was not as presentable, but still, Odessa is worth looking at. And the last question, yeah. Karlsruhe, Venezuela, we cannot do without it. Well, we would like to give the last question to someone from Russia, probably.
Greetings from Venezuela and from President Nicolás Maduro, your friend. You know, right now, about 30% of countries around the world are under some kind of illegal sanctions from the United States. You mentioned defending the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. Last month, the group of friends in defense of the Charter met in New York, and one of the issues they addressed was contributing to create a zone free of illegal sanctions where business can take place and we can be free of those impositions. what do you think Russia can do to help create this space, and how do you envision that this could happen? And if you have a message also for the people of Venezuela. Thank you.
Знаете, Россия
You see, Russia counters sanctions that have been imposed on us. And through these very actions, Russia creates a certain space of freedom to free you of fear of sanctions pressure, to make it possible to develop ties between different regions and different countries. No specific decisions are required in that regard. The very example we give, I think, is very instructive. A colleague of yours has just asked me what signal we can send to the citizens of the West. I told him about these signals, and I also spoke about the errors committed by the leadership of the West in the global economy and global finance, in energy, in food. A testimony to that, there are sanctions introduced against Venezuela, whereas Venezuela is one of the biggest world oil producers, well, until recently. Iran faces sanctions. Russia is also under sanctions. There is a threat of sanctions against Saudi Arabia currently. There are also plans to introduce an oil and gas price cap for Russian oil and gas. At each and every step, they commit mistakes that result in most grave consequences for the countries that introduce sanctions at the very beginning. And then they're trying to find someone to blame, even though they're the ones at the origin of these consequences. But all that notwithstanding, Venezuela is still developing. Yes, there are problems, but Venezuela is overcoming them. Look at sanctions against Russia. When they were introduced, our economy was expected to collapse, and we spoke about that at the beginning of our today's meeting. The blitz against the Russian economy failed. As you can see, our inflation rate is going to be 12% by the end of the year, more or less. And there is a downward trend. In the first quarter of next year, our experts project inflation to stand at around 5%, whereas European developed nations are facing 17%, in the Netherlands 21, 23%, in some other countries, so it's twice as high as here. Our employment rate is 3.8%. It's slower during the pandemic. Before the pandemic, it was 4.7%. The budget deficit next year is projected to be 2%, then 1.4%, and in a year, 0.7%. And it's almost in all Eurozone nations, it's higher. Our public debt is several, by magnitudes, it's smaller than in the US or in the European countries. Yes, this year, our economy is projected to contract by 2.9, 2.8%. Yes, it's going to contract. But the industrial output and the manufacturing will stay at the same level. The construction sector has grown by 5% during the first 8 months of this year, 5.1%. Our agriculture has doubled. We see a bigger volume of lending both to the corporate sector and to consumers. We are witnessing a growth in lending. It's true there are some issues due to an outflow of money from the banks due to the events you're well aware of, but right now the money is getting back because rather than keep money in a box at home, losing it due to inflation, it's better to put the money in the bank because our banking system is highly resilient, so the lending rates are going up. You asked me what Russia can do to create conditions to be free of these sanctions, to develop steadily. I think it's a good example. We have to band the efforts together, the efforts of those who are all interested in that. We need to achieve agreement and a balance of interest, as I have pointed out on many occasions, and then success will be ours. And I think, we can wrap it up at last. Mr. President, at the outset I said we were expecting you with impatience, and I think we're leaving here satisfied. It'll give us a lot to think about. I sit in this chair, and I think impressions can differ, but I think this is one of our most successful discussions, given the range of topics and the overall ambience. A huge thank you, and we're already impatient to see you next year. I would like to say thank you to our moderator, and I would like to thank all of you for the interest you are showing in the relations with Russia. I refer to our foreign guests, and as far as all the experts of the Valdai Discussion Club are concerned, I would like to say thank you for working on this platform. Indubitably, you make a great contribution, tangible contribution, to the brainstorms that are in such great demand to take decisions at the practical level. A huge thank you to all of you.